ಇದ್ದಾರಾ ಸಾಹೇಬ್ರು?
Santosh, so let us start.
Sure, sir.
Yeah, because I think Minister sir is not responding. I requested Malkade sir to deliver the keynote. I hope Dr. Vibu Prakash, Chris Bowden, and Dr. Prayag are in the board. Dr. Vibu Prakash, can you hear me? Yeah, Chris, I can see you. Okay, thank you. Dr. Vibu Prakash, are you there?
Yeah. Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you. So now, good afternoon, everyone. Actually, because of some urgent schedule, I think Minister is not able to join today's Wildinar. So today's Wildinar will be addressed, the keynote address will be delivered by Mr. Subhash Valkade sir, Additional PCC of Wildlife, Karnataka. So I welcome Subhash Valkade sir to this webinar on vulture conservation in Karnataka, special in the context and in the context of the country. And I welcome expert on the panel board, Chris Bowden, the co-chair IUCN Vulture Specialist Group, Dr. Vibu Prakash, Deputy Director, BNHS, and currently in Pinjore, I think, Dr. Prayag, who is a Chief Veterinary Officer, Assistant Professor in the Veterinary University, Karnataka. I welcome all the participants who are participating from different locations in this webinar. This is a very specialized topic, and the topic is on vulture issues. And now we know currently the vultures major concern area for the country. The country has taken up many exceed conservation programs also. In this line, Karnataka also has initiated the process of exceed conservation. Now, without delaying, I welcome Malkade sir to take over and deliver the keynote address. Malkade sir, over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Natesh. Am I audible? No.
Sir, your voice is very feeble, sir.
Feeble, huh? Okay. Just move towards desktop. Is it audible now?
Yes, sir, it is audible.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Natesh. This is a very special webinar that we are taking up. In the run-up to Wildlife Week celebrations of 2020, 66th Wildlife Week celebrations that we are having this year. And because of a very precarious COVID-19 situation, we had no option but to conduct such courses and we have been conducting, this is the sixth one, and every Wednesday we have this kind of a webinar. Today's topic is conservation of vultures, and there are experts with us, Dr. Vibhu Prakash, Dr. Chris Gordon, and Dr. Prayag. All these three people are experts in vulture conservation. They have decades of experience behind them. But as a wildlife manager, I would first focus on what are our limitations and what we expect from such discourses which we are having today on through web. Actually, the role of vultures is well known right from mythological times in India, and now when we are facing the challenge of conserving each individual of a vulture. If you many of you are youngsters, but all those of my age had seen groups of vultures sitting wherever there was a dead carcass, and I myself, I would personally say that in a single group, I could have seen more than 200 to 300 vultures at a time. But today's situation is far different from what it was earlier. And today we need to conserve this species because they are vultures are required for conservation, and they are very, very important species in the ecosystem. As scavengers, we do require a species of the kind of vultures we have here. And for the same purpose, Karnataka Forest Department, along with Karnataka government has taken a step to have a vulture sanctuary just on the outskirts of Bangalore, that is Ramdevar Betta Vulture Sanctuary near Ramnagara town. And today's lecture will be focused on how to conserve the existing vulture population, as well as how we can reinforce the existing population through breeding programs. And I am happy to share with all of you that Karnataka has also received a breeding program, has been approved by Government of India, and this year we are going to start the establishment of breeding center in Karnataka. So with these few words, I would now invite all the experts to come on, and I will hand over to Natesh to further modulate this discourse. Natesh. I think Santosh, you can take over.
Okay, sir. May now request Chris Bowden to take over the floor, please. Hello, Mr. Chris.
Yes. Hello. Yes. Am I audible now?
Yeah, you're audible.
Great. And is that one image on the screen, or?
Not yet.
Ah, okay. One just coming, I think. Is that come?
Sorry, not yet.
No. It says that I'm sharing, but can you see an image or not?
Yes, Chris.
Okay, I'll assume you. Let's since I have been based in Bangalore, so it's particularly very briefly to touch on a global perspective, but I want to focus mostly on South Asia and India specifically, and give a quick run through. Okay, so vultures worldwide are 23 different species, and but here's a slightly more friendly images of the 23 species worldwide, but one very worrying feature of those 23 species is when you look at the conservation status globally, and over half of the world's vultures are red data book species, and in fact 9 of the 23 are critically endangered, but 4 of those are right here in India, and in fact 3 of them here in South India.
Sorry to intervene, Chris. Or can I just intervene, Chris? Sorry. There is some issue with the screen sharing. We are not able to see the screen. Can you share it again? Reshare it.
All right. Okay. Thank you for telling me. Tell me if you can. So what could you see? You could see nothing, or?
Santosh, can you see that? Because I can't see anything.
Nothing. It is showing. Double click to enter full screen mode.
Okay. Strange. Let me just unplug my external screen. Still not sharing?
Still, it is not sharing.
Chris, can you stop sharing? Let me give a try from my side here.
Yeah.
If you can stop sharing, I will start there. Okay. Yeah. There is some issue. I'm also not unable to share that. Sorry.
Sir, please.
Okay, I will try one more time, shall I, with mine?
Yeah, please. Yeah. Meanwhile, I will forward the same to CE and
Please share it to me, sir.
Yeah, I will share it.
You can WhatsApp me, so I will share it from here.
So you had it briefly, did you?
Yeah, it was there on my screen clearly.
Right.
Sharing now.
I'm sharing it. You can start.
Yeah, it is there.
Yes. Chris, you can switch off your video. It's consuming more net, I think. Please, I request you to switch off your video. You can continue the presentation. You can guide me. Just next, I'll put next slide.
Yeah, I'm trying. Okay.
You can start.
Okay, next slide, please. So I need to tell you, or can I do it? Yeah. Yeah, next. Hello. Can you move the slides, or can I do that? Yeah, next. Next. Can you move on? Oh dear, this is painful, isn't it? I have one alternative suggestion that if it is a bandwidth thing, I will switch to my mobile hotspot, and in case that would help. Okay, can I
Some audio issues? Yeah.
Right. Can I suggest that I take back and try?
Okay.
It's going to be difficult, isn't it? So
Okay.
Can you?
Okay.
Do apologize to everyone. Is that showing?
Yes, Chris.
Yes, is it showing?
Yes.
Is there a map?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
good. Yeah, good.
Wonderful.
It is showing. Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. So, what's happening? Oh. So it's a single image, is it?
Yes, it is single image. Yes.
Okay, good. Right, as I was trying to say, and so sorry, let's start again. So of the 23 species worldwide, over half of them are threatened in red data book species. And indeed, although 4 of those critically endangered and 1 endangered species is here in India, and obviously vultures are in trouble elsewhere in the world. And in fact, a recent review by the Convention of Migratory Species produced a 170-page summary, a wonderful document, the Multi-Species Action Plan for all vultures in the Old World. But this map is probably the most...
Kindly make it full screen.
Oh, yeah, okay. This map is, yes, thank you. Is that better? This map is definitely the most important output. Can you see that all right?
Yes, yes, it's perfect. Please go ahead.
Good, good. But as you can see, well, I realize there's a lot of information on that map, but the threats to vultures in different parts of the world are actually surprisingly somewhat different. And in Africa, there are threats of poison baits, of belief-based use, and that's a very, where people believe they have some special properties, no scientific grounding, or sentinel poaching. So 3 very different threats. But here in South Asia, the underlying and by far the key threat is unintentional poisoning through non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs and diclofenac in particular. Now, this year we have produced a summary for India of the status and the key threats and actions needed, and it's called the policy summary for India, which you can download from the SAVE website, 8-page document. But here is a very quick summary of the status of all the 9 species that are found in India. And you can see that the top 4 are the critically endangered 4, then Egyptian vulture, endangered, and the numbers are actually really rather low for those species. And for white-rumped vulture or oriental white-backed vulture, that figure of 6,000 birds in India is absolutely tragic compared to the millions of vultures of that species in particular, which there were previously. Now, identifying vultures, I'm not going to go into any detail on this, but just to say that some of the species are fairly distinctive. The bearded vulture in the Himalayas, the Egyptian vulture is quite distinctive, cinereous vulture even. But in fact, most of the species are of the genus Gyps vultures, the griffon vultures. And although the adults are quite distinctive, the subadults are really quite confusing. So identification of some of these intermediate ages of vultures, because they take 5 years, 6 years to mature and get their full adult plumage, is really quite confusing. And that's something which we really need a bit more and careful field guides to that. And that's something perhaps Vibhu Prakash, when he has time, would be the ideal person to produce something like that. But vultures here in India, of course, have got very special significance. I think we're all aware of that, and particularly in Hindu mythology, but also for the Parsi communities and the Himalayan hill communities where sky burials are important. But the underlying and major significance of vultures here is their cleaning up of the environment, and they were so ubiquitous across the country up to 20 years ago. And these scenes in Delhi and these photos that we often see of the former superabundance of vultures in Delhi in the 1980s are something of the past now. And I don't think there's any expectation that we'll see these kinds of superabundance ever again. And they're really facing total extinction is the very real prospect for these birds now. So unbelievable for something that was so common. But the estimates of how many vultures there were in India vary a bit, but I think a consensus is that there were 40 million vultures in India alone 25 years ago. And we know that they consume 5 kilograms of meat per week each. And so with a very simple calculation in terms of all that rotting meat, because they're scavengers, they only eat dead food, but you can quickly extrapolate from that. So there are 12 million tons of rotting meat which were consumed by vultures 20 years ago, which are no longer consumed by vultures, and something else happens to that food, that meat. And one of the things that does undoubtedly happen is that it supports a higher abundance of feral dogs. And with feral dogs, of course, an increase in feral dogs, and we have good data showing a 30% increase in the early 2000s. With that increase come increased risks of not only dog bites, but of course rabies. And there were still 7,000 human deaths by rabies last year. So the threat of extra dogs posing to humans is a very real one. But there are lots of environmental consequences of losing those vultures. But I get to this stage in my talk and I can't avoid talking much more about the main culprit for those dramatic declines. And it was a bit of a mystery, and Vibhu and his team were actively involved in determining what had caused those dramatic declines and documenting that. And of course, it was found in 2003 and really confirmed by early 2004 that diclofenac, the veterinary painkiller, was the main culprit causing those declines. It's used in cattle as a painkiller, an anti-inflammatory, and we discovered that it was being used so widely by the veterinary community. And this is some of the early data that helped to confirm that it really was a problem of diclofenac, and that of all the dead birds that were picked up around the country over that period, the one common feature of dead birds at that time was that they were all showing gout symptoms. That's uric acid crystals on the internal visceral organs. And the analysis of those carcasses, once diclofenac had been confirmed as a problem in Pakistan, we found that the carcasses also from India, every one that had gout had diclofenac in the tissues, and everyone that and a few that had died of something else and no gout symptoms, none of those had diclofenac. So this 100% correlation between these things further confirmed that diclofenac was indeed causing the death of these birds. That's a whole story on its own. We could go into a lot more detail on the detective work, but by 2004, once it was absolutely clear that diclofenac was indeed the main issue, 2 main actions were identified. And it was actually early 2004 when I first became full-time involved to help coordinate a reaction and put in place whatever we could to save these species from total extinction. And the first action was to remove diclofenac from the environment, and that involved finding an alternative drug that the veterinarians could use. And the second action was establishing a breeding program. And I'm going to mention that briefly, but Vibhu will tell us more and has obviously led that and very much of this work here in India. So as a result of that, clear finding and publications in very high profile journals, including Science and Nature, globally recognized science that this was indeed the problem. We were very fortunate. The then Secretary of the Ministry of Environment in Delhi, Pradipto Ghosh, took the science very seriously, and indeed the Prime Minister, Manmohan Singh at the time, on the National Wildlife Board, agreed that it was something that needed action, and the Indian government took that key step, and that document in the middle of the screen there was indeed, has probably been the single step that has prevented the total extinction of vultures to already. And a key element in getting that agreement was that the BNHS team and the IVRI had managed to identify one safe alternative drug, meloxicam, which had very similar properties, if not identical, to diclofenac. So that was key. Other steps have been taken to further push for the ban to be more effective. We found that the drug companies had rather cynically started producing human diclofenac, which is exactly the same thing, in large vials, which were unnecessary for human medicine, and the hospitals didn't require these large vials, but actually it was a clever way of illegally selling diclofenac to veterinarians. But that was a further step back in 2015 after advocacy work from BNHS and others at the time, successfully got the vial size restricted to 3 ml maximum, which is all you need. You really only need 2 ml for a human being. So, so that's made it more inconvenient for veterinarians to illegally use diclofenac, and that the effects of that are still showing through. A further step that has been taken, which wasn't right from the outset in 2004, was coming up with something more locally that you could do, because those two actions, the breeding centres and banning diclofenac, were not something that you could get very involved with at a local level, and in fact they needed implementation at a local and regional level. And coming up with a 100-kilometre radius vulture safe zone initiative was one way of getting some more grassroots involvement, and we've got initiatives here in South India as well, although most of the activity has been in the north. And that's not only in India, it's also Nepal. In fact, Nepal had really led the way on some of this, and Bangladesh has also come forward and doing very good vulture safe zone work, which is indeed gazetted by the government in Bangladesh. So taking things a step forward. And these vulture safe zones are really targeted advocacy for the key state officials and drug associations, veterinary colleges, farmers groups, but as well as some careful monitoring of the different features of diclofenac and other drugs in cattle carcasses, and surveys and various other actions, which I won't go into the full detail, but there's a lot involved, and that's having a vulture safe zone initiative here in Karnataka is something that I think would be really a very positive thing, and something to consider. Right, moving on to the breeding program, which I mentioned. Vibhu can tell you a lot more about this, but it did bring in expertise from various parts of the world, from condors and Eurasian griffons, and Pinjore in Haryana, where Vibhu is based, is the center of that. But I will, I'll let him explain to you much more about this, because I think he's very much the best person possible to do so. There are other breeding centres. Pinjore was the first one, and the green dots are the ones run by BNHS, but there are other centres outside India as well, in Nepal and one in Pakistan. But actually India is leading the way, and the other zoos and CZA, Central Zoo Authority, supported centres are marked in orange. But as I say, I'll let Vibhu tell you more about those. Now, I just want to give you a little more perspective on how tackling this absolutely major issue has required very concerted efforts by several organizations, but trying to find ways of getting a really coordinated effort was not obvious how to do that. And the need to have a regional recovery plan and highlight the work for external sport and the priorities, and get those absolutely clear, as well as communication. And the idea to form a consortium of organizations back in 2010, and it was initiated in 2011, this consortium called Saving Asia's Vultures from Extinction. And Jairam Ramesh, the environment minister at the time, helped us launch in Delhi. And we've been really fortunate to have probably the most eminent raptor biologist in the world, Professor Ian Newton, who chaired for our first 4 years. And we've had an extremely helpful support from senior raptor biologists as our chairs since then too. But here are the 24 organizations that have signed up to save directly, but even and these do include a number of government institutions, and the IVRI, the Indian Veterinary Research Institute, is a member, as well as Forest Department in Bangladesh and in Nepal. But we're working very much together with all the Indian government bodies, and indeed they regularly attend the annual meetings where we review the recovery plan that we've produced. And so this was the meeting almost a year ago, which was last year in Haryana, or Himachal border. And we review this recovery plan and each priority action that's determined, and these are absolutely scientifically oriented actions. We flag them up as to whether they are green, on track, yellow, showing some signs of concern as to whether we are on track, and red if we are really worried that they're not on track. And you can see that quick summary table on the left there. There are a number of worrying red categories there. So there's still a lot to do. And the threats, I mentioned this in the opening slides, and you can see that even within Asia, we've got slightly different emphasis of threats. And here in South Asia and here in India, where non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs are absolutely still the #1 threat for preventing recoveries for the vultures. But in Southeast Asia, where there are only very limited populations, India has far more birds and much more important in that sense. But there are different threats to those populations, including the poison baits, unintentional poisoning, people trying to poison other animals, and habitat problem with nest sites and food availability. But those are not the main threats here in India, and endorsed by that CMS document, which is very recent. So I've mentioned SAVE, and I mean, I should also mention that my main role these days is to coordinate that consortium of partners. But there's also an intergovernment agreement and a steering group established back in 2012 with the 4 South Asian countries signing up to this, and just to mention that. So how does all this fit in with South India, you know, and are there any differences in South India compared to the rest of India? Well, I think there was a workshop held 2 years ago now in Uti, and in fact, the key actions came through as very much similar. The NSAID's threat, there's no reason to believe it's any different here. We know it's available. We know that that is an ongoing threat, but there may be a little bit more in terms of poison baits threat than some parts of the country, but actually the other threats are very much minor threats. Here's the workshop that I mentioned, and indeed getting more information available and surveys coordinated is one important step for this, as well as doing some and the establishment of Ramanagara as a sanctuary was a very interesting step that is certainly not enough on its own, and without a vulture safe zone, we know that the birds support travel far and wide. And in fact, I've got some rather exciting feedback from fecal analysis, which has just been carried out, and looking at the DNA coming through on the diet from the birds at Ramanagara. And Moshmi Ghosh at the NCBS and has just kindly shared a little of that with me. And even the long-billed vultures from Ramanagara are they are feeding, about half of the fecal samples are from wild ungulates, from Chital and Sambar, and the other half are from domestic cattle. So, rather excitingly, there was also leopard and camel in the results that are showing up as well. But that's we look forward to hearing more detail on some of that work. But I think it shows that even where the birds are going a long way to forest patches, they're still feeding on cattle carcasses to a very large extent. So very, very much vulnerable to the diclofenac and non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug threat. I mentioned this policy statement document, which summary, which is 8-page brochure. Do download it from the SAVE website. And the back page of that document is a brief summary of the NSAIDs which are available in India and what we know about them in terms of their safety to vultures. And I haven't mentioned it up to now, and I think Vibhu will be telling us a little bit more about this, but diclofenac at the bottom, we know was the main one which caused those declines, and that is illegal to use that in veterinary practice. But look at all the others, and at the top we got meloxicam, which we know is safe, but all the ones in between need testing, or some, in fact, even ketoprofen has been tested. We know it's unsafe. Aceclofenac, I'm really worried about, because aceclofenac transforms or metabolizes into diclofenac inside the cow within a couple of hours, so becomes as lethal as diclofenac, but is not illegal at the moment. So that's another devious way that diclofenac is appearing and threatening vultures. Nimesulide is another one that I'm very, very worried about. Tolfenamic acid has been tested, safety tested by the IVRI and BNHS team recently, and the results from that are looking really positive. So I think we will have a second safe drug, but that hasn't been formally announced as yet. So one bit of good news there. And this little summary is crucial to what I hope we might discuss. And in fact, there's just been a paper published last week on pharmacy surveys right across India and in fact, including Nepal and Bangladesh, but mainly in India, and showing just how much of these other drugs are offered to somebody doing an undercover survey asking for treatment for their cow. And you can see, well, there's a lot of detail in that. And again, do go to the website and download that paper and get the full story on that. So aceclofenac, I've mentioned, very, very worrying, especially now it's more available as injectable drug. And I think we cannot get a ban soon enough for this. And I really, really hope that the government, I know that they are considering banning this, and I don't see any reason why they wouldn't, but at the moment that hasn't come through. So very, very urgent. And there's tolfenamic acid, the bit of good news. So I've spoken entirely about India so far in the Asian context. In Nepal, where there has been more intensive vulture safe zone work and perhaps a little bit more possibility to reduce the diclofenac use in the veterinary community. And this graph is one of the, well, it's my favorite graph at the moment, because this shows populations are actually significantly recovering from the diclofenac threat in Nepal. The blue line is white-rumped vulture, the red is slender-billed vulture. And so real hope and real evidence that if we can do these vulture safe zone actions well enough, then it works and we can save vultures. But unfortunately, it's a much more mixed picture from India, and we'll say a little bit more about that. But in Nepal, they're doing releases from the breeding program there, and this into that environment is and satellite tagged birds, and we're getting results of where those birds are going. In fact, they hadn't gone anywhere for the first year and a half, but suddenly, since March, the birds have started moving much more widely, and some of them indeed into UP in India. So, and we've got some mortality of those birds, but so far it's sufficiently good that we believe it's looking like very very successful. Here in India, again, Vibhu will tell us more, but that we are planning releases, and we hope to have some news on that fairly soon. And indeed, it's a wonderful opportunity to engage. The Chief Minister of Haryana is very supportive, and to get high-level recognition. And we know that we're rather hopeful that even Prime Minister might partake in at some stage in these releases. So, just rounding up now on the key actions which have been agreed by these expert groups, and on what's really needed for vulture conservation across South Asia, but India very much central to this. And in fact, the immediate withdrawal of these veterinary drugs is totally the top priority. Although there's a little bit of progress in Bangladesh on ketoprofen, on these other drugs, so far, very little sign of progress. Tamil Nadu has taken some steps for restricting the availability of the drugs, the ones that are not proven to be safe, and in fact, some of the ones that are proven to be unsafe, they have restricted them from districts where vultures occur. So that's one step. And a further step, which we've been in touch here in Karnataka, is actually making sure that these unsafe drugs, at least they are not supplied to the veterinary services. And I believe that is now in place, although it's not in place as a long-term policy decision. So that's something which all the states could do as an interim measure until these bans come in, and something that I would highlight to any government officers listening, that this is something which, you know, can be done and should be supported and put into a policy level document somehow. And you will know better than I do how that might happen. The experimental testing by the IVRI and BNHS of tolfenamic acid, and getting that published, and hopefully at least the vets will be slightly happier that there's another drug that we're not telling them to stop using. But nimesulide is a very high priority, and there's lots of evidence that nimesulide is a real killer, or growing body of evidence for that. And indeed, some surrogate testing in Africa has shown that nimesulide does kill Gyps vultures. So very, very worried about that. But unless that safety testing is done, then we won't be able to get the legislation in place. Number 3 is something, and I've already mentioned it, and something that I think here in Karnataka we could think of taking up much more, is development of vulture safe zone work and vulture release zones. So, we've now got vultures in Pinjore that are ready for release, but we would need to know that the environment was safe enough, and monitoring the drug availability. So perhaps that's something that could be considered more seriously here. And finally, monitoring the causes of vulture mortality. That's really important to keep that up, and tracking of satellite tagged birds is one way of doing it, but monitoring carcasses, cattle carcass sampling, and doing a detailed analysis of that, but autopsies of any dead vultures, and that's something which we really do need more on, because we know that these things can change, and we hope that we will get to the stage where other threats are of more concern than NSAIDs, but at the moment they're not. What are the key actions needed in South India? Well, and our population's recovering. I don't think there are serious signs of population recovery in India. Stabilizing, and eBird data is showing that the populations are still at very low levels and not showing any immediate signs of recovery. And Vibhu's team planned to do a nationwide survey. Well, they planned it this year, but unfortunately that COVID prevented that happening, to get an update on where the populations are across the country. So this is the website that I keep referring to, the SAVE website. Do have a look at it and do download those materials. There's all sorts of stuff there. And if you would like more updates, do let me know. But I hope that's given some a quick overview and summary of where we are. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Grace, for the elaborative note on the vulture conservation scenario in Asia, and very particularly you mentioned the reasons for its decline in the population of vultures in India, on special reference to Karnataka as well. Can you hear me, please? Santosh, can you hear? Santosh? Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Chris, for elaborative note on this cultural conservation. We have noted down the issues that you have been raised. Actually, I hope it's very informative presentation was useful to all the participants over here. It is in fact a lifetime opportunity for many of them to hear from Chris Bowden, because such a personality who is involved in cultural conservation in India, especially and across the globe also as a education co-chair. And now we have another very eminent person who is the forerunner in terms of vulture conservation in Indian context. I will welcome Dr. U. Prakash, Deputy Director, BNHS, to take over, and I is the key person who is responsible for the ban of the one of the key persons responsible for the ban of the diclofenac in the country. As rightly mentioned in the previous presentation by Chris, that apart from diclofenac, there are many more non-steroid painkillers that we use in our veterinary use, basically are responsible for this decline in the vulture population. So we need to address that. And now I'll hand over the stage to Dr. Vihul Prakash. Thank you very much, Chris, again.
Thank you very much. I will just share my screen. Can you see it all right, please?
Yes.
Can you see it all right?
All right, all right.
And can you hear me? My voice is clear?
Clear.
Okay. I would really like to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to talk on vultures, which I always love to do. Thank you so much. And I will take you through this vulture conservation efforts in India. And I will be talking a little bit more on the ex-situ efforts. So vultures, they are the true soldiers of our Swachh Bharat. Vultures are scavengers, and they have evolved for scavenging. So usually the living being of their size can only eat 5% of the body weight, but vultures can eat almost as much as their body weight. And vultures are also social, and they are highly mobile. So they can travel hundreds of kilometers because they travel on thermals and without spending energy. And as you know, dead animal is virtually a culture medium of bacteria and fungus. And as soon as that takes place, bacteria and fungus start growing in it. And then they form spores, and then they okay, can you hear me again? So
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, sorry. So once the bacteria and fungus can form spore, they go into the soil and and whenever they get a healthy host, they spread disease. But vultures, because they are social, they are highly mobile and evolved for scavenging. So when they are floating in the air on thermals, they also keep an eye on other scavengers which are on the ground, and like the dogs and the crows. And if they see the scavengers on the ground going in one direction, one of them will come down and investigate. And if he finds that there is a carcass, he will not come down immediately. It will start taking circles, thereby advertising to others of its kind, floating in the sky on the thermals, saying that come, there is food. And so vultures can come from hundreds of kilometers within minutes. They can fly as much as by a speed of more than 100 kilometers an hour. And because the vultures eat very fast, they can finish off a carcass of a big cow or a buffalo, which is about 300, 400 kilometers, 300 to 400 kgs in minutes, and then they fly back. There is no other scavengers who can do this, because mammalian scavengers are there, but they are limited by distance. They cannot travel very much. So vultures are extremely efficient, and they were very common in India. We had an estimated population of over 4 crores in the country, and it was because we have a huge population of cattle. When it dies, it's thrown out in the open, and vultures come and they used to clear it up very quickly. And there wouldn't be any stench also, because what is stench? Stench is basically bacterial and fungal action on organic matter. But vultures do a thorough cleaning job because they are specialized in scavenging. Unfortunately, we have lost most of the vulture population. And the species which are very common, unless you keep monitoring them, you will not notice till you have lost 90% of the population. And that's what exactly was happening with vultures. But fortunately, Bombay Natural History Society monitors bird populations in various places. So we were monitoring raptor and vulture population in Kevala National Park in Rajasthan and several other protected areas in the country. So we had historical information on vulture population. So what the population we saw in mid 80s, and then when we again did the surveys in mid 90s, we saw a 90% crash in the population. And when we did it all over the country, we found that we had lost 99% of the population by 2007. And since Bombay Natural Society does nationwide surveys for population of vultures and raptors every 4 years, we now know that by 2012, the population had started stabilizing. Although the population was very small, 1% of the population reduced to exist, but the population had slowed, the decline had slowed down. And in case of white-backed vulture, it was also increasing a little bit, but in case of long-billed vultures, it was still declining. So when we knew that the population has crashed and it was declining, we tried to find out what were the reasons for the mortality in vultures. So we in fact systematically ruled out all the other causes of mortality, like shortage of food. We found that there was a lot of food available and there were no vultures. In fact, only 5% of the carcasses we saw had vultures on it. We also looked at habitat, and habitat was fine. The vultures occur from desert to evergreen forest, and they occupy different kind of habitats. They only occupy the tallest tree in wherever they occur. And even if no trees or habitat is there, they can even nest on housetop. So habitat was not a problem. Then we also looked at pesticidal contamination, because pesticide have caused havoc with bird populations across the world. Like DDT almost killed the peregrine falcon and the bald eagle. So we looked at pesticide concentration in vulture tissues, and there were pesticides, but not enough even to cause breeding failure. So then we saw vultures sitting in a very peculiar positions. They would be neck drooping most of the time, and when these symptoms appear, these vultures would die within 8 to 10 days of when these symptoms appearing. But during when the symptoms were there, they would also go out to forage. And then they eventually these vultures will die. So then we collected these vultures, we opened them up, did a postmortem, and we found that 76% of the vultures had died of visceral gout. And visceral gout is a condition when there is a kidney failure and body cannot excrete out uric acid. And so uric acid gets deposited on the visceral organs. So when we were doing studies in India, there were scientists from Peregrine Fund. They were studying vulture population crash in Pakistan, and they noticed they had very similar finding, except that they also found that all the vultures which had died of visceral gout had residues of diclofenac, a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug given to cattle in pain and inflammation. So what they did, they fed vultures on diclofenac, and they also gave them diclofenac through buffalo meat, and the vultures died showing very similar symptoms. So it was very clear that vultures were indeed dying of diclofenac. But and then when we saw the vultures, the dead vultures in our country, we saw 76% dead with visceral gout, and all the 76% of the vultures which we had in India had residues of diclofenac. So when we saw that it was indeed diclofenac which is killing vulture, it was very difficult to believe, because we know most of our we have a huge population of cattle, but most of them are not treated, and only 5 to 10% are actually treated. And diclofenac is a wonder drug for cattle and for humans. Within 15 minutes, it shows results. And it's not fatal for cattle, but the cattle has to die within 72 hours of administration of this drug, and the vultures have to feed on it, and then only they will die. So it was too much of a coincidence. So we took the help of one Dr. Green of Cambridge University to find out how much carcasses should have diclofenac in that, which can cause this kind of crash in population. And he came out with a figure of just, if he said that if less than 1% of the carcasses which are available to vultures have diclofenac, can cause the kind of crash which we have seen in vulture population. And we did carcass sampling across the country, and we noticed there was indeed more than 10% of the carcasses had diclofenac. So there was a lot of diclofenac which could have caused the crash in vulture population, and diclofenac is very inexpensive and available everywhere in the country. So, there are two things. One is cause of mortality, and one is cause of crash in population. So cause of mortalities are many, like they run into, get run over by vehicles or killed by crane, or somebody cuts the tree, then the vultures die, but that doesn't cause crash in population. Like we have almost 500 fatalities every day in road accidents, but there's no dent in population. So population crashes when there is very high mortality in adults, and that's what's happened because of the use of diclofenac. Because juvenile mortality in any case is very high, so that doesn't affect the population. What affects is crash and mortality in adults, and that was diclofenac was doing. It can also happen by unintentional poisoning, which is done in case of a cattle killed by a carnivore or something, but that is not so widespread as this diclofenac is. So that's why we thought that it was only diclofenac which is responsible for the crash in vulture population. And this is how diclofenac gets into the body of vultures and it dies. So fortunately for us, Government of India was very receptive to our research and suggestions. We had a vulture recovery plan in 2004, and Government of India came out with a vulture action plan in 2006. And the main recommendation of the vulture action plan was to put a ban on the veterinary use of diclofenac, identification of a safer drug, because diclofenac was such a wonder drug for cattle that Ministry of Agriculture said they would not be able to ban it unless we have an alternative drug for treating cattle for pain and inflammation. And then there was the third recommendation was for setting up a vulture conservation breeding program. Conservation breeding is not the best option. You should conserve species in their natural environment. But if conditions are such that you cannot do it in natural environment, then conservation breeding is a very good option. There are a number of species like Californian condor, Mauritian kestrel, and all. They have been saved just because of conservation breeding. And it is if it is done properly, it's a wonderful tool to save species. So fortunately, Government of India have banned the use of diclofenac for veterinary use in 2006 when we produced these results. And then, but we realized that even after the ban in 2006, when the diclofenac was withdrawn for veterinary use, the vultures were still dying. And when we noticed that there are the people, the veterinarian, not the veterinarians, the people who treat cattle, and in our country, it's not only the veterinarians who treat cattle, it's everybody treats the cattle. If you are a cattle owner and you know what some drugs, you will just inject it if your cattle is sick, and that's what was happening. So people who treat cattle, they were using multi-dose vials available for human use for treating cattle. And so diclofenac was still available. So we again went to Government of India, and fortunately for us and for the vultures, Government of India restricted the size of human packaging to just 3 ml. And now we hope that the use of this drug will really come down, and it has been coming down. So we keep monitoring the prevalence of various drugs in the cattle carcasses across the country, and we do it every 4 years. So after the ban of diclofenac, we have found that diclofenac prevalence has really come down in the cattle carcasses. And this survey done in 2013 showed that less than 2% of carcasses are diclofenac. And now with the ban of multi-dose vial, we expect that it will still come down. And we are just waiting for the results of the latest survey. So when we also looked for an alternative to diclofenac by looking at what the drugs are being used in various zoos in the world, and we found that meloxicam was a drug which has not caused mortality in raptors and vultures. You know what happens in non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug toxicity is if it is the drug is toxic, the uric acid levels in the blood will just jump up. So when diclofenac is given to a vulture and you monitor the uric acid, it will just jump up within hours. But when the meloxicam was given to it, nothing happened and it remained safe. And meloxicam is a second generation drug for cattle and for humans, and it is very safe, and it doesn't have very few side effects. The only downside is that it shows results of in 3-4 hours, and it is not antipyretic, which diclofenac is. But nevertheless, it's safe and safe for vultures and cattle, so we recommended it, and Government of India accepted this recommendation. But unfortunately, now we have found that there are at least 2 other drugs which are definitely toxic to vultures. That is ketoprofen, and other drug is aceclofenac. Aceclofenac is in fact diclofenac. It's a prodrug of diclofenac. So you inject it in a body of an animal or a human, it gets converted into diclofenac within hours. So it causes the same threat as diclofenac is. So we have approached Government of India, especially Drug Controllers General of India, through various state governments, requesting them to ban the drug. Then only we will be able to start the release program, which we are planning to do now. And there's another drug called nimesulide, which is now very popular in veterinary use. Also we have reasons to believe that it causes visceral gout, and it is almost as toxic as diclofenac is. And so this drug also needs to be restricted or banned. But what we found out from our studies, that it is not only drugs, it is the way we use it. You know, as I said, in our country, there are a lot of people who treat cattle, not necessarily veterinarians. So they regularly overdose it. So we found that sometimes overdosing is as much as 35 times the normal veterinary dose. You know what happens is if they give a drug to a cattle, and if she doesn't recover within a couple of hours, they inject it again, then again and again. And so they make it, so the carcass of such a cattle is very toxic. And you know, toxicity depends on the amount of drug is there in the body. So it's dose dependent. And so, and the other thing is the NSAIDs are on Schedule H of Drug and Cosmetics Act, and they are supposed to be sold on prescription, but that never happens. Anybody can go and buy NSAIDs and treat his cattle. So that is a big problem in our country, which we had to solve, because banning all the drugs sometimes may not be possible. Because these drugs are also used for humans, and like diclofenac is very useful for humans in rheumatic arthritis. So I think we have to be, as a society, we must be more responsible and follow only best practices in veterinary care as well. So now we are also doing safety testing for various molecules and NSAIDs available in the market with Indian Veterinary Research Institute. We do it at Pinjore, where we keep the birds and they come and dose it and do the experiments. So we did experiment on tolfenamic acid on vultures. And fortunately, we have found that tolfenic acid is safe for vultures. It has not caused any elevation in the uric acid level. And fortunately, tolfenamic acid is also antipyretic. So probably it will solve some of the problems of vulture conservation. And we will test other drugs and see how we do. And like we are also, although we have lost 99% of the population of vultures, but 1% of 40 million or 4 crores vultures is still quite a lot. So their vulture population is all over the country in different parts, but in small number. So we are also trying to protect these population by trying to make sure that no diclofenac is used in at least 100 kilometers area of a vulture colony or uh, uh, roosting site. So we are doing it at 8 different places in the country. And so we have established a vulture conservation breeding program. And I think conservation breeding program, we will never be able to bring back the numbers we had earlier, but it's an insurance against extinction. So we are now sure that vultures will not get extinct because we know how to breed them and how to keep them safe in captivity, even if they go extinct in the wild. So conservation breeding is an important, very important program in saving species. And when you have a conservation breeding center, you don't not only breed birds, you train people, you have a place where you can store samples and get them analyzed. And so they work like vulture conservation center. And then you can train your manpower, which can be do surveys, collect samples, and everything, which is lacking in the country at the moment. So fortunately, Central Authority has developed a very good manual for the husbandry and care in all the centers, and all the centers uniformity in management of centers is very important, and that's what Central Zoo Authority has been trying to do it. Pinjore Center is a coordinating zoo, so we coordinate all the efforts of vulture conservation. So we have now 8 different centers in the country. The Pinjore, Rajabhat, Khawa, Bhopal, and Rani are being run by the State Forest Department in collaboration with Bombay Natural Society, and the rest of the centers are run by Central Zoo Authority in collaboration with state government, and we do provide technical support. So when we thought of doing a conservation breeding program, the immediate question was how many we should breed, because breeding is not difficult, but you should breed in certain numbers where we can be released back in the wild so they can perform the ecological role, and they should be genetically diverse so we can save these populations also. So we thought of releasing 600 pairs of each of the 3 species in wild. And for that, we thought of having 6 different centers because we didn't want to put all our eggs in one basket. And from each center, we wanted to produce 100 pairs of each of the 3 species and release back in the wild. So we have now the centers, and we have been quite successful. And I'll just tell you what we do in the centers. When you keep the vultures or any birds in captivity, the thing which you have to worry the most is disease. And if the disease strikes, then you are done for. So what we have a very good quarantine facility for vultures. So we have a quarantine facility about more than 5 kilometers from the main center. So whenever we wean vultures, we keep the vultures in quarantine facility for 40 days, and we do a thorough health check. And if they are found healthy, we bring them back. 40 days is the incubation period of Ranikhet disease, which is very prevalent in our country. And then since vultures are slow breathing and long living bird, and you can age a vulture only till it is 5 to 6 years old. So what we did, we collected nestlings or juveniles, and because we want known age birds in the breeding program, and it took them about 5 to 6 years to come into the breeding age, and now then they started breeding. And the first F1 generation we also kept for as a founder stock, and the F2 generation we are now going to release back in the wild. So if the vulture this is a colony aviary. Colony aviaries are the largest aviary. They are about 100 feet long, 40 feet wide, and 20 feet high. And since vultures are social birds, we can keep 30 to 35 birds easily in this aviary. You can have aviary twice the size or thrice the size, but that will not give any benefit to the vultures. And the only problem of keeping a big bird like vultures in captivity is that they have to be sitting all the time. And when they do that, they develop pressure sores like thing in their foot pad, and that develops into a disease called bumblefoot. And if that happens, you has almost lost the bird. But this thing can be easily avoided by giving them a rough surface to perch on. So that's what we did. We wound all our perches with coconut rope so they get a rough surface and they don't get this. And we give all facilities to them in nesting ledges. There's a lot of water. The flooring is all sand, so they don't have problems in the feet. And 30 birds are kept inside, and there's very good ventilation, but we do keep bamboo curtains so to give some visual isolation, and also to make sure that vultures don't collide against the wire netting. And vultures, they can fly around, and it is near natural condition. They can fly and all. And we have other aviaries for other purposes, like we have display aviaries, we have breeding aviaries, and also hospital aviaries for the birds which get sick in the center. It is an off-display facility, so we don't let people in, but we have kept birds in display aviary. So whenever anybody wants to see a live bird, we can show it to them there, and don't let them come in. It's also because we don't want diseases in the breeding program, and we keep a very good record of all the birds. So we have marked them, we wing tag them, we leg bend them, we also put a microchip, and we have details of the morphometrics. So we know we have all the details of all the birds in the computer, and we know which bird is breeding with whom. When we started breeding centers, there are very few labs who can do bird work. So we have to establish our own lab. So what we do is once in a year we catch all the birds, and we do a thorough health check, and also we breed 10% of the birds to see if they have any disease. If they have any disease, we isolate them. Otherwise, we send them back. We don't treat them. We don't give them any vaccination because they have to be sent back in the wild. But we do monitor their pesticide load by checking the fecal samples and also the blood sample. And we have good labs in our vulture centers for hematology, biochemistry. And vultures are sexually not dimorphic. So you have to sex them only through their DNA. So we do have a small molecular lab where we do sexing of birds. And we do have a microbiology lab to know what is the microfauna in their guts. Unless you know that, you cannot treat them. So nobody knew about vulture microfauna, but we did develop the lab, and now we know it's there and we can treat vultures. Food is very important in vulture conservation breeding program because because the vultures have died of diclofenac. So we make sure that food is not contaminated by diclofenac. So we keep goats with us for 10 days. Then we slaughter them, skin them, and give them the entire carcass. And if the goat has been treated by diclofenac, it is excreted out within 72 hours. And every vulture gets 4 to 5 kilos meat per week, because that works out to be 5% of body weight per day. And vultures don't eat every day, so they are scavengers. So we try to mimic this situation, and we give meat to them twice a week. And they all feed communally. And in vultures, there is no hierarchy. The hungry bird is dominant. So every bird gets to feed, and we can monitor whether the bird has fed or not by the crop. They have a crop at the base of the neck, and if it bulges out when they have fed, so we can monitor it that way. And the sorry, it got stuck. So vultures, they love to take bath, when after feed, usually they bathe themselves, and since they are social bird, they don't have any no fights. It's one by one almost. And all their activities are synchronized, whether they're feeding or whether they are bathing or whether they are sunning. It's all together. And when we keep vultures in captivity, we make sure they do wing exercise regularly. And if the aviary is big enough and it's good ventilation, the vultures can do wing flapping the way you have seen them now. That's how they keep their wings in good shape. And if they release them, the vultures will just fly away without any problem. That's what we are sure. And the nesting at the center happens exactly as it happens in the wild. The vultures start breeding from September, October. They make their nest, and vultures pair for life, and they start making pair when they are 3 to 4 years old. But they lay fertile eggs only when they are 6 to 7 years old, and they identify a ledge for themselves, and both male and female share duties equally. They bring the nesting material, incubation is shared by both of them, and everything is shared. Incubation period is 55 days, and nest building can sometimes be for 2 months also, and that also helps in pair bonding. When they are incubating, the incubation shift can be very long. Sometimes it could be for 10 hours and so, and the vultures get really stiffen up. So they then really they exercise themselves. It's almost like doing a yoga just to keep them in good shape. And you can see the egg, which is just at the edge of the cot. And vulture egg weighs about 200 grams, and by the time it hatches, it loses from 14 to 17% of its weight. And both the birds, they are there with the chick when they are feeding it. And since the chick, when it is born, it is about 175 grams, and within 4 months, it becomes 4 to 5 kilos. So the food requirement and calcium requirement is big. So you see how it's feeding on a big bone, which the parents have brought in the crop. So the parents bring food in the crop and they regurgitate. And the chick can pick up the regurgitate. So, but the other parents, it seems to be monitoring the size of the morsel. So maybe to prevent the chick from choking up. And vultures lay only 1 egg per year, and only 50% of the eggs are really hatch and reach to adulthood. And they breed on just one a year. So what we do, and if a vulture loses its eggs within 3 weeks or so, it tends to lay again. So we take advantage of this. So vultures, when it lay eggs, we remove the first clutch when it has incubated for 10 to 15 days, and then it lays again within 3 weeks to a month, and we incubate the egg artificially. And the egg hatches within 55 days, and then we keep the chick with us for about 10 days, and then we give it back. So, and we monitor the weight of the chick very closely, so you should not put on a lot of weight. If it puts on a lot of weight, we can easily kill a chick. And after 3 days, we keep the chick also in sun for half an hour for vitamin D3. And if these birds are not exposed to vitamin D3, they cannot assimilate calcium, and they develop metabolic bone disease. So we have been successful in breeding all the 3 critically endangered Gyps species of vultures in captivity. And we also now do a chick swapping. Like we take the first clutch egg, when it hatches, we give it back to the parents, and we take the second clutch. And this way we increase the productivity. And this we have started doing it since the second clutch, the hatchability was not very good. But now when we give the first chick back and take the second egg, it hatches well. And then we have been successful in getting more chicks. We have to be very careful of infections, and also we take all that care. So now we have about 766 vultures in various zoos. And as you will notice that the most of the vultures are in Pinjore, Bhutan, Buxa, Rani, and Bhopal, which are managed by Bombay Society. At Pinjore, we have 371 birds. And we have bred in the centers 314 birds we have bred in the center. They are all captive bred. So in all, we have bred 444 birds so far in different sectors. So since we are now successful in breeding, and the use of diclofenac is going down steadily. So we are now thinking of releasing vultures back in the wild. So we have now started the reintroduction program. So, our breeding centers are off display. They're not for public because of fear of infections. But when you have to release birds back in the wild, you need public support. And what the best way of getting it is to invite public figures in the center. So we invited Chief Minister of Haryana to come and release birds in the pre-release aviary. Because, the way we are going to release birds is doing soft release. So we will keep birds in an area we are going to release birds in a pre-release aviary. They will get used to the surrounding there, and we will also attract free-ranging vultures. So these vultures will form flock with the full free-ranging vultures. And when we know there's enough interaction, we'll open the gates and the vultures will join these free-ranging vultures. And the free-ranging vultures will act as guide birds. Then our success is going to be better. That's what we think, and that's what we are going to do. So this is a typical pre-release aviary. So in this aviary, there are crows also. So vultures know what they expect when they are in the wild, and they can see all around, and they can see dogs and cattle and everything else. And we also attract free-ranging vultures just outside our pre-release aviary by regularly providing food. So when we know there's good interaction, environment is safe, we will lift the gates and the vultures will go out and join these free-ranging. So this is how the interaction takes place. The wild vultures or the free-ranging vultures want to come in, and the captive bred vultures want to go out. And so this is what exactly we want, that our vultures should join the wild flock, then only they will be successful. So what we did, we had, although we know that when we release birds, they will be able to fly, but since they are in captivity a long time and a lot of people have suspicion or they doubt whether these vultures kept in captivity will be able to fly when they are released back in the wild. So what we did, we have 2 Himalayan griffons with us for over 10 years in captivity. So we thought of releasing them first, and we invited the Union Minister and the Chief Minister of Haryana to release these birds in the wild. And so they came and they opened the gate one day on the 3rd June, and you will see how smoothly the bird flew out of the aviary without hitting anywhere. This is how we went outside, and this is what exactly we wanted. And then we were providing food to the vultures, and this vulture, you can see the orange wing tag would feed with the wild vultures, and it will not come to us for food, and we were very happy with that. And within a month, this vulture started soaring. It started finding its own food, and this vulture, while soaring, would not collide anywhere. It would come across power pylons and trees and everything, but it will not. So we were very happy. So now we know that the birds kept in captivity for long can also be released back in the wild, and it will be successful. So we are going to start the release of our critically endangered white-backed vulture this year, and because of the success of this breeding program. And we have obtained satellite transmitters for this bird, and very shortly, maybe within a month, we will be releasing birds near Pinjore centers out in the wild. And once we will wait for 1 year, and if there is no drug-related mortality, we will be releasing 20 to 40 birds every year in the wild. So these are the transmitters we have obtained. 4 of them are GSM transmitters, and they're based on mobile phone technology, and 4 are the GPS transmitter. They're based on satellite technology. And this is our plan of releasing first in Pinjore and then in other parts of the country like Madhya Pradesh and Assam. But before we release them, we are going to make sure that from the release site in 100 kilometers area, we have good vulture population, good food availability, habitat availability, and no prevalence of diclofenac and anisette. So we are working towards that, and we are happy that the use of drug is steadily coming down. We do undercover pharmacy survey, and you will notice that meloxicam is a safe drug. They are becoming popular, and diclofenac is going down. Although there are other drugs which are coming in the market, but none of the other drugs have now started dominating market as diclofenac used to do many years ago. And we have also looked at food, and we have found that a lot of food is available. There are very few carcasses where vultures are there, and there are a lot of carcasses where there is no scavengers, not even dogs. So it means that there is food abundance. And we also do a lot of advocacy and awareness program, especially directed towards the drug controller and animal husbandry people, because they are the ones who can really save vultures. And here the drug controller Haryana came to our center and he gave a pledge to all the druggists and chemists that they will not sell diclofenac or any toxic drug for veterinary use. And we are also doing awareness program. We found that calling people to the vulture center is a much more effective way of telling them about vulture conservation. Then they will know how much efforts are going on, then they understand it better and they implement it. We are also targeting all the forest officers, especially the IFS officer, the trainee IFS officer from IGNFA and from forest schools. They come here and see what is happening, how much effort has been taken in vulture conservation. And we hope that will really help us in vulture conservation across the country. And we are not alone. We have a lot of partners and supporters who have seen us through. Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, of course, a big supporter, and they have been now funding. Royal Society Protection of Earth has been a very trusted friend, partners, then the funder, and Darwin Initiative Survival Species, International Center for Birds of Prey, where we got all the clues about husbandry and care and breeding birds, Zoological Society of London, Indian Veterinary Institute, and Wildlife. Thank you so much. That's all I had to say. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vibhu Prakash. That was really a very enlightening presentation. Culture conservation and breeding program, especially in India, is really in the initial stages, and we need to rise to the occasion and take it to the level that we have to. We are very sure that we have to save this species. All the 4 species that we are right now targeting need to be brought to the viable population side. So I'm sure that under your guidance, the Indian vulture breeding program will be, taking a better shape in coming days, and more states will join hands. This year again, the state of Karnataka has also planned a vulture breeding center right near Bangalore, a place called Ramdevara Betta, and you are aware of the events, and we'll be catching up with you on that as well. And it was really a very enlightening presentation, and many issues related to the conservation program you have brought in very detailed. I thank you, especially from my behalf and my behalf of the participants here. Thank you once again, and I now have Dr. Prayag, who is a Chief Veterinary Officer, and he's a practitioner. Also, he's also Assistant Professor in the Veterinary University of Karnataka. So he's also actively involved in vulture conservation programs. I welcome. Now, over to you, Prayag, for the veterinary issues of the vulture conservation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Indeed, it's my privilege to be invited for this webinar, especially sharing the screen with my mentor, Chris Bowden, Vibhu Prakash ji, and all the forest department officials whom I had worked in one way or other way. So I don't have a presentation to share because my work is more of lab based, and I started working with Chris 2 years back when we had met in Ooty, and according to the Ooty understanding, I took a responsibility of doing more of poisoning work. So the one which was earlier doing forensic work was on tigers, basically big cats and other thing. So to my surprise, when I started working on vultures, we started getting samples. Like I used to, after that seminar workshop, I started interacting with people and started requesting them if they can send me the samples of vultures which have died for whatever reasons it may be, and wanted to try out our forensic principles. Basically, in the veterinary college, we have IHVB, where I have my colleague Vijay and Lohit and other people who are very fortunate to work on this neglected topic. We don't think of, once to do the postmortem, we don't think of this angle, especially disease component as well as the forensic component. So we did get good number of samples from outside the state, in maybe Tamil Nadu or West Bengal, Assam, through a common group. What we have found in our studies so far is, I was sharing this with Chris also, that whatever the poison they're using for lacing the cattle as a revenge for big cats or any carnivores, we could see the same poison found in the carcasses of birds. So it was very surprising for us that obviously it goes without saying that once the tiger or the carnivore, they feed on this carcasses laced by poison, they do die. Parallelly, these carcasses are scavenged by the vultures. So when you are doing this kind of a study, we got this correlation that not only the people who are poisoning, other retardation killing, they're indirectly killing the vultures also. Already the vultures have a big threat from the diclofenac and other drug which Chris and Vibhu sir has mentioned. Apart from that, we have one more threat which is baited poisoning, not to kill the vultures as such, but to kill the big cats. So then we started exploring more, and we have a quite number of cases where we have found the same samples from those tiger reserves for the tiger poisoning or big cat poisoning. And after a few days, when the veterinarians have gone there and seen, and they share in the group that vultures have died, I would request them, as there been a kill happening there and tigers have been dead, I told, yes, then please send me across. We will first see the panel with OCC poisoning, OPC poisoning, zinc phosphide, and cyanide. We didn't get any cyanide poisoning, but it's a common poisoning. What they use is OCC, organonucleotide compound, OPC, organophosphorus compound, and commonly used rat poisoning. And recently, we had a case where they use the pesticides what they use for buffalo ticks thing. So my only appeal to all the veterinarians, all the people, forest officials is this: if you find any vultures or any birds in that case, which are scavenging birds, which have died, please ask your veterinarian to conduct postmortem and send us a sample. So we want to rule out this kind of poisoning, which not only kills the big cats, but also kills the vultures and other scavenging birds. And I make an appeal that we don't want to charge for these samples, though it costs us money. But since we get it funded for the tiger thing, I would use the same kit. Recently, we cracked the tiger case in Goa. So thankfully, government of Goa has been fortunate enough to fund us. So without any hesitation, if forest department officials or people working in the forest, NGOs, if they do come across any birds dying, please feel free to send to Veterinary College, Bangalore. We will definitely prioritize and do free of cost. I take this opportunity to thank Nadesh sir when he was the commissioner of animal husbandry. Me, Chris, had a fortunate to meet PCC of Sanjay Mohan sir, as well as Commissioner Nadesh sir. They were very helpful, and they made a point that those drugs which have been toxic to the vultures, they didn't indent. And I thank Rashmi Mahesh, then Secretary, for coming and joining hands in the vulture conservation. And we do have a group of veterinarians, vets for vultures. So we do create awareness among our veterinary community. Though diclofenac is very much rampant earlier, now the para-staff are using, but again, we among veterinarians make this a point to go and tell not to use those, and we don't use ourselves. So now, since the general heterogeneous group, I do request you people, wherever you come across anyone using this diclofenac or these kind of malpractices, please do bring to our notice. We are there with the forest officials and other officials to see that these kind of malpractices don't happen. And with these few words, I thank Karnataka Forest Department, where I had worked for a long time, and Nadesh sir, my mentor Chris Bowden, and Vibhu Prakash for giving this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Priya. Actually, it was good actually your concern for the conservation of vultures and other species of the bird. For keen interest have you shown during my tenure. I remember you approached me for the ban of some of the drugs that are in use of animal health treatments. I remember putting a strong letter to all the veterinarians to avoid use of all these drugs, especially the few drugs that we have been brought to my notice like aceclofenac and other than diclofenac was already banned. Of course, aceclofenac was plus. This was also taken off from my tender list. It was now I don't think it is in the tender list of the animal husbandry department. So we have that is a initiative from Chris and your side, and we supported that. I'm sure that veterinary department will continue to avoid such drugs. And thank you for this inputs also. And I remember visiting while during my visits, to the various veterinary hospitals. I have seen doctors actually need to sensitize them. Some of the doctors I found using the diclofenac formulations that were available in the market for human consumption. In fact, I don't want to name the doctors here, but still, I issued a strong notice to some of the veterinarians. So, even not just Dr. Guru Prakash was saying, across, apart from the veterinarians also, other quacks you involved in animal health treatment, they also using these banned formulations in higher doses, basically. But even the learned doctors sometimes with the demand of the farmers, farmers are really need to be also touched upon when it comes to sensitizing the use of these drugs. They want a quick results, so they request the doctors to go for a doses like the diclofenac, which gives a quick result. So I said, and I even instructed, in fact, I gave a notice to some of the doctors also, please uh, stay away from using such diclofenac formulation, especially. And with our initiative from the central level, we took out aceclofenac and other few formulations that were notified to be very dangerous to the culture conservation. Thank you for the inputs again. So it was a lively discussion, and we have intentionally this time avoided other participants to be asking questions on the live. So we will allow the participants. Otherwise, there was the previous experience was that many participants want to ask questions in between the. Can you hear? In the previous webinars, the participants were keen to asking many questions to the speakers that halted the flow of the presentation. So this time, with all care, we have said that only panelists can speak, and rest of the participants can only listen and then chat in the box. So I'm seeing many charts coming in the chat box here, and there are so many questions been sought. And I request now the panelists to take up the questions and answer few of them. A very important one, I hope. The Santosh, Mistry, Manjunath, George have listed some of the questions. Maybe they may spell out here, or if you experts, Chris or Vibhu can see the question from the chat box, if you can take out some of the questions and answer those questions of our participants. I must tell you here, there are younger participants, lot also is participating, like school-going kids are also part of this webinar. So there may be very basic questions. There may be some of the questions they are very out of enthusiasm, or they may be very intuitive nature. They are asking many questions. I request panelists to take some of the questions, and if Santosh can take through this question and answer session. Thank you.
Thanks, Natesh. Honestly telling, most of the questions have been answered by the experts. The questions that have been put it in the question and answer session.
Already in the chat box answered. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So, any more questions, or you would like to allow through the verbal questionnaires, or will go ahead to the face session? You want to permit any questions?
I feel that if they have very specific question, if they can type immediately, we can answer. We can take some of the questions. But 99% of the questions have been answered by our experts.
Go to the quiz session.
I think we should go ahead with the quiz session.
Yeah. Now invite Mr. George Varghese to take over the quiz. Now there will be a quiz session, and all the kids, I'm sure you are waiting for this last session also. So,
Start.
Perhaps if we're just waiting, I could say something, Chris. Yeah. Okay.
So good evening, good boys and girls. I hope you are all waiting for this quiz on vultures. I see we have been seeing that a lot of very anxious kids waiting to know the time when it will start, and we were suggesting that we can only start the quiz at the end of the webinar. I hope all of you had a very good webinar. There were very interesting speakers, and as I always said, if you are very attentive in the webinar, you would be able to easily answer all the questions. Okay. Shall we go to the rules of the quiz program? Rules for the online quiz on World of Vultures is as follows. You need to only answer in the chat box. No voice answers will be considered because we have muted your voice. So even if you shout also, if you give the answer in voice, we will not be able to consider. Okay. There will be a total of 15 questions, one-word questions, one word questions, and you will have 30 seconds for answering the question. And the fastest correct answer will be declared winner. Once you are declared winner, we will announce who is the winner, who has answered it first, following which you will have to share your email ID, telephone number without fail for you to get the e-certificate and the prize. Whoever answers maximum questions first will be declared the overall winner for this particular quiz program, and they will be eligible for a mega prize from the Forest Department during the Wildlife Week celebrations. This is scheduled to happen in the first week of October. Right? Shall we go ahead? Just mute.
I think we can go ahead, please.
Okay. I think okay, here comes the first one. Okay, it's a very easy one. Which are the two continents where vultures are not found? You need to name both the continents. Which are the two continents where vultures are not found? You should answer in the chat box. Okay, let's go to the answer. Two continents where vultures are not found are Antarctica and Australia. So answer to where vultures are not found is Antarctica and Australia. These are the two correct answers. Let us see who's answered it first. Vedhansh has answered it correctly. Congrats, Vedansh. Please share your email ID, phone number, and correct full name, please, for you to get the certificate. Okay, congrats, Vedansh. Let's go on. How many vulture species are there in India? Are found in India? How many vulture species are found in India? This was a very easy one. So you should be able to, and this was also told by empty times by our speakers. So you should be able to crack this at the earliest. Let's see the answers. 9 species. 9 species of vulture out of 23 worldwide. We have in India. These are the 9 species: Griffon vulture, Indian vulture, Himalayan vulture, bearded vulture, slender-billed vulture, white-rumped vulture, cinereous vulture, Egyptian vulture, and the red-headed vulture. So 9 species. Let's see who's answered it correctly. Shruti Patnaik. Shruti Patnaik is answered it correctly. First, congrats, Shruti. Please share your email ID, phone number, full name, please. Thank you. Let's move on. Identify this vulture species. This species was also shown by our speakers many times, and if you are very attentive, you could easily identify the species. Okay, let's move on to the answer. It's a white-rumped vulture. White-rumped vultures is an old world vulture native to South and Southeast Asia. It has been listed as critically endangered on the IUCN Red List since 2000 as the population severely declined. White-rumped vultures die of kidney failure caused by diclofenac poisoning. So the correct answer is white-rumped vulture. Niranjana has answered it correctly. Congrats, Niranjana. Please share your email ID, full name, and phone number, please. Let's move on. Which vulture is known as the largest true bird of prey? Which vulture is known as the largest true bird of prey? Okay, time's up. Let's see the answer. Cinereous vulture is known as the largest true bird of prey by its sheer size. That is, it is known to come from. It is known to have a size of 90 to 110 centimeters and weighs about 7.1 to almost 12.5 kgs and wingspan up to 295 centimeters. And it has got a life expectancy up to 40 years in captivity. So cinereous vulture is the cinereous vulture. Let's see who's answered it correctly.
Dr. Suchitra.
Dr. Suchitra has answered it correctly. Congrats, Dr. Suchitra. You may please share your email ID, full name, and phone number, please. Okay, let's move on. Which vulture is called as the Pharaoh's chicken? Which vulture is called as the Pharaoh's chicken? Pharaohs, you must be knowing, from Egypt. So this vulture is named after the Pharaoh's chicken. It resembles a chicken and it is known as the Pharaoh's chicken. Let's see which is the correct answer. Let's move on. Egyptian vulture or the white scavenger vulture is known as the Pharaoh's chicken. The name is because of the use of the vulture as a symbol of royalty in Egyptian culture and their protection by pharaonic law common on the streets of Egypt gave rise to the name Pharaoh's chicken. The goddess neckbelt was also portrayed as a vulture. So that's why the Egyptians considered a vulture as a symbol of royalty. So the correct answer, let's see who's answered it correctly.
Keshav Murthy.
Keshav Murthy has answered it correctly. Keshav Murthy, congrats. You may please share your full name, email ID, and phone number, please. Let's move on. When is International Vulture Awareness Day celebrated? When is International Vulture Awareness Day celebrated? If you don't know the date, you can also give the day and the month.
Nearest answer will be given.
Yeah, the nearest answer will be given. If no correct answer is coming, we will give to the nearest answer, right? International Vulture Awareness Day. I see a lot of interesting answers coming in. Let's see the answer. International Vulture Day Awareness Day is celebrated on the first Saturday of September. First Saturday. That's why I was telling. If no dates are available, you should tell the date, the day, and the month. The first Saturday of September is celebrated as International Vulture Awareness Day. So it is basically to educate people about the true nature of vulnerable animals such as the vulture. Hundreds of zoos, aviaries, nature preservation centers worldwide each year come out with different fun and informational activities, helping everyone to learn how interesting and valuable these vulture birds are. Okay, let us see who's answered it correctly.
P. Sucharita.
P. Sucharita has answered it correctly. Congrats, P. Sucharita. You may please share your email ID, full name, and phone number. Let's move on. Which chemical is responsible for large-scale decline in vulture population in India? This is an easy one. I think all kids, I should see a 100% answer in this because this has been told many times, at least 100 times by our speakers. So you should be able to crack this. Which chemical is responsible for large-scale decline in vulture population in India? Okay, let's move on. Let's see the answer. I think I see a lot of correct answers. Now, diclofenac is the correct answer, which is used as a painkiller in veterinary science, which is used to treat inflammation in livestock, which is fatal for vultures as they experience acute kidney failure leading to death when they eat the carcasses of animals. The use of diclofenac was banned by the government of India in July 2006 in the view to conserve vultures. So diclofenac is the correct answer. Let us see who's answered it correctly.
Pranath.
Pranath is answered it correctly. Pranath, congrats. Please share your full email ID, full name, and phone number, please. So let's move on. Where is the first vulture sanctuary located in India? This is a very easy one. Where is the first vulture sanctuary located in India? This also was told many times by the speakers, mentioned many times by the speakers. Let's move on to the answer. Yes, the correct answer is Ramdevarabhatta in Ramnagar district. It was established in the year 2012 by the government of Karnataka. The sanctuary is spread over an area of 346 hectares. 3 out of the 9 species of vultures are found in this sanctuary. The long-billed, the Egyptian, and white-trumped vultures are seen here. So Ramdevarabhatta in Ramnagar, which is very close to Bangalore city, about 40 kilometers from Bangalore. So interested folks can visit this vulture sanctuary and see the birds for yourself. So let's see the correct answer is Ramdevarabhatta. And who's answered it correctly? Niranjana is answered it correctly. Congrats, Niranjana.
Niranjana is leading in the poll.
So Niranjana is leading the quiz tally with 2 points. Many of them are with single points. And let's move on to the next one. How many groups of vultures, taxa, groups of vultures are divided into? If you don't know what is taxa, just stick out to groups. How many groups vultures are divided into? Groups. Okay, a lot of answers I'm getting. Very interesting answers. Let's see the answer. 2 groups. Vultures are divided into 2 groups, popularly called as New World vultures and Old World vultures. These are the 2 groups. The New World vultures are restricted to North and South America, which includes the Californian condor and the Andean condor, along with other species. Totally about 7 species are there, which is in these New World vultures. The Old World vultures include birds that are seen mainly in Africa, Asia, and Europe. So total of 16 species. So 16 plus 7, 23 species of vultures we have in planet Earth. 2 groups is the correct answer. Let's see who's answered it correctly.
Shruti Patnaik.
Shruti Patnaik has answered it correctly. Congrats, Shruti.
Shruti and Niranjana are 2-2.
Yeah. Shruti and Niranjana, are tied with 2 points and they are leading the online quiz. So let's move on. Do vultures circle around dying animals, true or false? Do vultures circle around dying animals, true or false? I see a lot of answers, true, false, true, false. It's a very easy one, but you should know the. Let's see the answer. False. It's a myth that vultures circle around dying animals waiting to feed. These birds are powerful flyers and soar on thermals while they look for food, but they can't sense when an animal is dying. So only when the animal is dead, they'll be able to locate the carcass by smell, sight, or by sound of other birds feeding. They approach it quickly before the other predators find it. It's a myth that vultures circle around dying animals waiting to feed. Okay, let's see the correct answer. Who's answered it correctly?
Dr. Suchitra.
Dr. Suchitra has answered it correcect. Congrats, Dr. Suchitra. So we have.
Suchitra also has got 2 points.
Okay, Suchitra also has got 2 points along with Niranjana and the other person. Shruti Patnaik. So Shruti Patnaik, Dr. Suchitra, and Niranjana has tied up with 2 points. So let's move on. Which are the 2 condors which are included in the vulture family? 2 condors. I was telling about the New World vultures. So the 2 condors which are included in the vulture family. I see a lot of answers, correct answers, but many of them are also giving name of the vultures. Okay, let's move on to the answers. The 2 condors which are in the vulture family are Californian condor and the Andean condor. Californian condors are found in the central and southern California, in Arizona and Utah districts, Utah states. And Andean condors are found in the Andean mountains adjacent Pacific coast of Western South America. The current number of wild population of Californian condor is about 160. It was also reintroduced following a close encounter with extinction. So let's see who's answered it correctly.
Shruti Patnaik. No, she is the leading.
Shruti Patnaik is taking the lead, and congratulations to Shruti. You are taking the lead now with 3 points, followed by Sucharita and Niranjana.
No. Suchitra.
Suchitra and Niranjana. Sorry. Let's move on. Other than Ramnagaram, which is the other place where vultures can be seen good numbers in Karnataka. In Karnataka. This is. In Karnataka, please, we note the change of question. Other than Ramnagaram, which is the other place where vultures can be seen in good numbers in Karnataka. It's not in India, in Karnataka. Okay, let's see the answer. Bellary, 3 species of vultures are found in border areas of Bellary and Raichur districts. This is as per the latest checklist released by Dennis Lepage in 2020. He has recorded 3 species of vulture in Bellary and Raichur district border. This is another place where vultures can be seen in relatively good numbers in Karnataka. I was told by my teammates that no one has answered it correctly. So maybe you should, it's time. Within the time, nobody has answered. So no winners for this particular question.
First time in this.
So this is the first time in the 6th webinar, we have got no answer, no correct answer for a question. Okay. Yeah. Let's move on. Identify this vulture. A lot of answers coming in. Okay, let's go to the answer. The answer is long-billed or Indian vulture, which is native to India, Pakistan, and Nepal. It is critically endangered in the IUCN Red List since 2002, as the population was severely declined, as was given by the speakers earlier. So the correct answer is long-billed or Indian vulture.
Indian vulture or long-billed?
Whoever is answered correctly, either of the thing, long-billed or Indian vulture, will be giving the correct.
Then Jai Sharma.
Jai Sharma has answered it correctly. Congratulations, Jai Sharma. Please give your full name, email ID, and phone number. Long-billed or Indian vulture, right? Okay, next one is a trivia question. Vultures pee on their legs to cool off during hot weather. True or false? Vultures pee on their legs to cool off during hot weather. True or false? Okay, a lot of answers coming as true and many of them saying false. Let's see the correct answer. Correct answer is true. Vultures pee or urinate on their legs and feet to cool off on hot days. The process is called urohydrosis. Their urine helps to kill bacteria and parasites which they have picked up from walking through carcasses or perching on dead animals. So they are known to urinate or pee on their legs to cool off on hot days. Okay, the answer is true. Let's see who's answered it correctly. Shruti Patnaik is answered it correctly. Congratulations, Shruti.
She's leading with 4 points.
So she's leading with 4 points now. Let's move on. What is the group of vultures called? What is the group of vultures called? What is the group of vultures called? Okay, let's move on. Group of vulture is called committee, kettle, or wake. So if anybody has answered it correctly first, or either of these three, you will get a point. A group of vultures perched on a tree is often called as a committee. In flight, a flock of vulture is called a kettle. And when the birds are feeding together at a carcass, like the one you see in the picture, the group is called a wake. So the correct answer is committee, kettle, or wake. Either of the, if anybody has answered any of these, you'll get the point. And let's see who's answered it correctly. Shruti Patnaik, I think, is running away with the first prize. Congratulations, Shruti. This is good going by Shruti. I think she's reached the highest so far getting 5 points in all the 6 webinars we have been hosting so far. This is the highest point somebody has got, about 5 points. 5 fastest finger. Let's see. Yes, with this we come to the end of the quiz. Let's see, we'll declare the winner in a minute. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, George.
Okay, the first prize goes to Shruti Patnaik with 5 points. Congratulations. I think we all should give her a big hand. Followed by Niranjana.
Dr. Suchitra.
And Dr. Suchitra. Congrats to all 3 of you. I hope you have given the email IDs and the phone number, full name to get the certificates, and they will be contacted for getting your prizes during the World Wildlife Week celebration.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you so much.
With this, we come to the end of this webinar on.
May I request last comments? Natesh, can we give an opportunity for our experts to give their last comments, if at all, if you have missed anything?
Anything you want to add? Santosh?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, please,
Okay.
please.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, just well, first of all, thank you again for this opportunity, and I'm really pleased to hear that Karnataka government is taking things forward, and I think it will be really doubly good if the vulture breeding center that is planned can be done at Ramnagara, because I think that would be really very, very suitable, and being further from any other population would be good. But I think this chance to speak and to really, I've been doing my best to answer many of those questions that came in. I think I've answered about 40 of them, and a really wonderful level of interest from the participants. So always very motivating for us who are so involved in this to see that level of interest, and looking for ways that you can help, talking to your veterinarians, local veterinarians, your pharmacies, on which drugs are being used. There are ways that you can engage, and of course going to see a vulture I think is really important, and going to Ramnagara is a great opportunity for us here in Bangalore to do that. So I encourage you to do that. Do it responsibly. Don't try and disturb the birds, but you can see them. Usually they leave at 9:30 in the morning, so you need to get there before they leave the cliff if they are there. And yeah, good luck with that. And thank you again for giving me this opportunity.
Pleasure having you, Chris. It's our pleasure to be having you on the board here. And Dr. Prayag and Dr. Vibhu Prakash, would you like to add something?
Harish, thank you. I thank Kannada Forest Department. It's always a privilege to address when they called from the Natesh sir. I was really thrilled and thank Chris Bowden, my mentor, was always there. When the vulture is there, I only think of Chris Bowden and Vibhu Prakash sir. And all my veterinarians, I have only simple appeal to make. So now that we know how much we play a role in that, so let's not encourage anyone using diclofenac. And whenever you do postmortem, please do collect samples of vultures. And as I rightly committed in the before, though it costs us money for the vulture thing, we'll do it free of cost. I reiterate, many people don't send sample to us because they tell it will charge 5K. But I, through this webinar, give a promise. We may charge for other thing, but for vultures and wildlife, I promise not to charge, not only now, in the future to come. So please support us to save tigers, to save vultures and the wildlife from poisoning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Prayag. Dr. Vibhu Prakash, would you like to add anything more?
Yeah, I think, yeah, I will thank you. It was a wonderful webinar. I really, and it's very good participation. And I think for vulture conservation, we have, as we know, drugs, the veterinary drugs are the only problem. And one more thing which I will really want to emphasize is we must ensure best practices in veterinary care, which I think is a very big a problem, not only for vultures, but so many. And when you overdose animals, and it's really cruel. You don't, and then it's waste of money, also waste of everything. So now the time has come where we should follow best practices in all walks of life, including conservation and veterinary care. And thank you so much. It was wonderful to be there, part of this.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vibhu Prakash, Dr. Chris Bowden, and Dr. Prayag. It was a pleasure having all of you on board on this very important and very entertaining and very involved. I think all of you have done a lot of homework and to come to this webinar. I remember this has shared the presentation 2 days earlier. Only I just had glanced through that also. So very wonderful having you and hearing you directly, and will be interacting more with you, Dr. Chris, and of course, he is on the team. So we'll be interacting with Dr. Vibhu Prakash also. That's a good opportunity for others, in fact, to be hearing directly from you about the vulture conservation issues across the world, and especially in context of Karnataka here. So with this, I thank one and all for contributing a lot in this webinar. Unfortunately, due to some urgent work, our honorable minister, Anand Singh sir, could not come and address the gathering over here. So due to the COVID scenario, we have to maybe for some more time, we may have to bear with all this web issues as well. We had started with when we started with the present webinar, we had some issue with the web also. So I thank personally from my behalf and also from on behalf of the Department of Forest, Karnataka, plus the Government of Karnataka, and Chris Bowden, Dr. Bryan, Dr. Vibhu Prakash, CE and the team, Santosh, Manjunath, George, and our senior officials who have participated in this webinar, Malkade sir for delivering the keynote address, and all the participants basically young ones who have done their bit, and I hope they have benefited from the webinar. Thank you, and we'll be catching up later. Thank you very much.